Tarvada temche kimbo komotoga do mundio komotoga ki lamrim chigo mares chidu temba tinyu dubaki go magide di nyamne chege nyamne chigo mares dizon do gyongres diza ande ne chigda gyongro istine res and gesi gabriel ya ta ndu chikdene ke chure chewe inaya 내가 저 최제에 누구 충주 개와 누구 충주마다 연구 말에 가르세네 근데 군어들 세티 잠기 기위 군에로 제가도 근데 내 군어디 가서 군웅 거라 세티 잠기 자월 미바자 개와디에 충주리 해서다 야 지금 개와 집이 걸로 군어들이야 안지된 추기에 안지 담년다 직대네 차비 온그 군에 아직 개와 제외네 근데 디바자 개와도 님들어서 개와 부이다고 실리고 말에 제산디네 자는 저기 this chazan no juries did no jury 가르지는 연구를 했나 제자다 아마 저기 치와 잼바 먹음바다 아니 지게 딜로디 안에야도 먹음바다 남친이면 먹음비기 괜히 해서지 어두시네 아주 가산디 일로 괜히기 되는데 사실 봐시로
Good morning. So we started last night was the second session of looking at the presentation of the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, where we are looking at the first a topic, which is on the impermanence of this life. So this has four primary outlines: the faults of not being mindful of death, the benefits of being mindful of death, what kind of mindfulness of death should be generated, and then finally, how to cultivate mindfulness of death. So of these four, we've started to look at the faults of not being mindful of death. So this is to challenge this innate sense that we all have, this innate sense that we will always be here. So we don't explicitly think, I will not die. We accept that we will die, but there's this underlying feeling that it'll probably be a long time before death comes. And in fact, we don't even feel that there is this possibility, a real possibility of dying this year or this month, or certainly not today. So this is what we strive to recognize and challenge and eventually eradicate, because, and now we come to this first outline, the faults of not being mindful of death. So because of not being mindful of death, we remain focused on achieving this life's minor and temporary pleasures and overcoming this life's slight and temporary problems. And secondly, we have no determination to achieve enlightenment. We may, because of the teachings we've received, have a wish to attain enlightenment or have this statement in mind, but it is not a determination. And when we do try to accumulate virtue, our virtue is weak because the underlying motivation is weak due to still primarily being focused on this life. being focused on the attainment of this life's pleasures and overcoming this life's problems. Therefore, our accumulation of virtue remains weak. And then, moreover, when we accumulate virtue, our virtue our motivation is mixed with the 8 worldly concerns. And therefore, not only is that virtue weak, but we also accumulate non-virtue. So at the times of trying to accumulate virtue, not only is that virtue weak, but we also accumulate non-virtue. So these are some of the faults that we've looked at already. And we're coming to hearing these and then recognizing them develops the determination to abandon these faults. The faults that we've looked at thus far are that not being mindful of death prevents us from striving for the Dharma. And when we do, our virtuous minds remain weak and we also accumulate non-virtue. But in addition to those faults, there's also the fault of procrastination that follows from not being mindful of death. So when the motivation arises within us, I need to accumulate virtue, I need to create the causes to attain liberation and enlightenment, easily the laziness of procrastination arises and deceives us. And we delay, we procrastinate, we put it off for another day, believing rather that some worldly task or responsibility is of greater importance. So in this way, our life gets consumed. And moreover, when we look at the period of time that we have, how much of that is consumed with merely sustaining this body through required sleep, as well as needing to cook and to eat and to exercise and so forth. So these requirements to sustain this body consumes a lot of our time. And then of what is left, we put a lot of that into various expressions of entertainment, being with friends, being with our devices. And this consumes a further large portion of our time. And then when we do have some other time aside, all too often the thought comes, I don't feel like it today. I don't feel like it today. And this lethargy then consumes much of what remains. So in this way, we come to recognize our actual situation, that despite having many hours in the waking day, so little is left where we have our mind focused on the Dharma. So this is a further fault of not being mindful of death.
tarvada temji kimbo ko to he yemle na kewa chimo wonde ko to he nyamle ya ko chi je ra gyo chi gyo ma ra chi tu gyo ma ra di ma che ma tu ba de nga so le di che ma tu ba na so gyong ro ba che sa ga sing ga so ra ko ye di ka sne 띵게 대화 타바 담지키며 고모 토고야다 디기도 주고라 원디오 고바토게 디텔레 디기대가 라고 그러봐 지산 디 라야게 규딩아 좀 마사바자 제부디 라고 말이 경찰이요 디 마사와디 가르치베 사투고 말씀 지산 삼로 디니게 두시네 이 레데반자 디기 델레 님뭐 마틴 바샤샤도 나 디 아니 규디 사투고 말 규사마도디 제부 용고 말 지산디 용경에 사실 경이 비김제로 디차고 거다
What these faults that are listed here all lead to is that this precious human rebirth that we've all attained, we do not achieve its potential, we do not take its essence. So in this life, where we have all the required inner and outer conditions to make great strides towards the attainment of liberation and enlightenment, to cultivate actual paths within us, that is the opportunity that we lose. Because by continuing to not be mindful of our death, our life continues to be wasted in distraction and idleness, of valuing things that have no real essence, have no real value, of striving to achieve this life's pleasures and overcome this life's problems when they are minor and insignificant and transitory. So in this way, we do not accumulate the causes that would lead to the attainment of liberation and enlightenment. And this comes through not being mindful of death. And without accumulating the causes, the required or the desired result cannot be attained. So this is what the great fault is of not being mindful of death.
대삼도 마세사 세디 푼조 훌랑베 뇨모당 대자베 니주남 아니 제유수 손에 취기 뒤질에 잡기 초대 나서도 티버 제베 델레 마로와 지지유스.
Then continuing with where we concluded last night, so in the handout you're at the top of page 91 and in the published book near the bottom of page 80. Not only that, through putting great effort into the excellences of this life, the mental afflictions and faulty behavior induced by them increase, and you turn your back on the nectar of Dharma. Since that leads us to lower rebirths, what could be more inappropriate than that?
치워된 마공바이나 안에 델리아 균디네 요레스 디지 공마셰바 디균디 잠도 디네 마세 안에 지나야 카리로스네 안에 가 저기 세디기 안에 푼소 룰랑베스 제데다 가 저기 세디기 된다 주야게 된다라 디기 주야게 된다라 양지 내가를 먹고 제가 되다 또 세디 잠기 디기 주야 동화세 된다라 내가 제가도 나 내가 제가 디기 긴기다 아주 요모모 먹기 거래서 디로 왔다 가 저기 디게 룰랑베 뇨모바당스 제자 뇨모바기 제자당 아주 디치 제 딜레시 유 랑초라 차비게 차바기 차베 원게 아니 아지게르 디주고스 차바기 유디르미 차바기 차바디 유디게 차베게 유디 주야게 된다라 된다마두디 드네 밀리아 고허 당고야다 진시와야 차고레 드네지 아니 임 고허 당고야 차야다 대야지 원유시와야 차야다 디네기에는 뭐 지금 어두시는 녀모바 기용고레스 녀모바 기고레스르바다 제사 되차다 공로당 안에 가야라서 바디네 녀모 기고레스 어디 체디 분조루라가 체디 잠이 디기 주에 동아세에게 자와지요도 자와지비가보다 디네 군로야 는 아주 직되샤기야 공적이야 내가야기야 차도기야 디네기 녀모바 기고레스르바다.
Not only that, so in other words, not only faults such as those listed above, through not being mindful of death, there is an additional fault, and that is through putting great efforts into the excellences of this life. In other words, by being dominated by achieving this life's pleasures, and overcoming this life's problems, having that as our primary objective, as a primary motivation behind what we do. This is what we are striving for. These transitory pleasures which lack any real value. And we are striving for them because of attachment. Therefore, our afflictions arise. And when we encounter obstacles or obstructions in the attainment of these desires, or the fulfillment of these desires, attachment's companion, aversion, arises. Not only do attachments and aversions readily arise, so too do other afflictions. So this is further presented. Not only that, through putting great effort into the excellences or the pleasures of this life, the mental afflictions arise. And through the arisal of the mental afflictions, we end up engaging in faulty behavior that is induced by them. We'll lie to others, deceive others, take advantage of others. So illustrations of faulty behavior is that. So as to achieve this life's mere pleasures, these temporary happinesses that have no real value.
And it was that Bendigo Jugi Pero Shavan, citizen, you society together, Duma say, that Lagaro share Digi, that Denigi, Lagaro Chibene, Jig Naju, Alasoba, that Denigi, sometimes do the Jiggy and Jiggy, then Yadi, Jueta, Jinyadi, the Chawaki, Denigi, it's also been to Donala, and Dissimia, there is. Sweaty Kunaki, Alasoba, that is no more Bachagoro, Dibachagoro, no more Bachagoro, Kunoki, Diwan, Sevatan, and the chick Zemazeva, Soba, the Tipamon Basagoro, Chisankuno, the Nigit on the Yomo Bajeda, and Yomo Bajeva, and the Kuno de la Duchau, Condor, and Yomo Bajeva, the Yomo Baji, Jang Begin, Luna Jebas, Yijinam, so that Chesa Luna Jebati, Jigis on the S, the Condor gave and the Condor Diwan gave, Luna Jebati, Jikia. 做不起来，但现在内部给家伙，现在对修车修出来了，说把它。第那个呢，车规我给第那呢，第那个呢这，第一个我给他另外一个把这个都是呢给定这个现在内部给家伙的忙着，这让是那个内部家伙的忙着，我这是基于这呢。实际上第那些的，实际上在第那个公路的了，鸟毛被公路浪。 另外就把的用我们国内人就把的先连六把的车位给两个的这样的，那个是呢第八三个了吧？第八三个的区域对这来解决错吧的，是区域对这是的改化啥吧？区域对这是改化去，真改化来解错吧的是，但改为多少没改化的都用过来解的吧。
The Lama Tsongkhapa is so clearly pointing out is that because we are not mindful of death, we continue to believe that the pleasures of this life are worth striving for. And the problems of this life, these have great magnitude in our mind. And because of this, our afflictions arise, we deceive others, take advantage of others. We may even take life to gain money or to gain pleasure. Because being dominated by attaining, by the wish for the pleasures of this life, we engage in a wide variety of activities, not just to sustain our life, but for pleasure and entertainment. And this too fuels our afflictions. So here we should also look at what where we choose to put our energy in terms of relaxing or to trying to ease our mind. Because all too often, these forms of entertainment or pleasure lead to afflictions arising. Afflictions such as competitiveness, of having afflictions such as dividing between ourselves, our group, and another group, where we are competitive, or we have opponents and other side. And this leads to afflictions arising, seeing others as separate, as different, as less worthy. So in this way, we see how striving for the pleasures of this life's excellences, this leads to attachment and aversion arising. And with attachment and aversion present, we will accumulate non-virtue. And the result of that is we do not we turn our back on the nectar of Dharma. In other words, we turn our back on the accumulation of virtue, the fulfilling of this life's potential.
nöbe samba tsewe samba ki urwada che dene tsewe samba nöbe samba ki edu an digi samba di kunne la genji de an chi lyunga ge kasore an chi ge lyujeba an chi ge zela so pa da dene ge an chi ge chancha la so yuba la so ba jine degi je dan pe chi milya so ge je da mi gang ma bu de dene ge je sa diba mbu sa go urwada je sa dene za ge la du ji ge le che che di zile se che vale che più ciò che va di passare ore se ci duro per oggi e di nasce ro ma come come ci di nessi vada come kuina na boku kuma kudo ge samaki de karjin ki waso so so ge kan se ya da so so ge di gi du ya ge di don da ya ji kuma ku tse be kuma kudo kuma ki de da di mi ka ro ku ni je sa da di kudo kuma ki de di ki en lui yu ko ne an ji pa xian ge zi gu ya da chuo ba la so ba jie de ni di ba sai go ro ba je san de ni che ge do ge wa le do chuo ni di ba sai go ro ni ji je ze bie zhen zhou qing da di song zhe xia zhang a zui sei bu xu qing wa shen pa guo de jian ye cai go ro ba.
From not being mindful of one's own death, then one continues to follow one's desires, striving for this life's temporary pleasures and overcome this life's insignificant problems. And this leads to, this comes together with afflictions, and from afflictions comes non-virtuous behavior. So to give some illustrations that are easy to recognize in our world, from wanting to achieve this life's pleasures, one sets one's heart on the attainment of a particular goal, and one exaggerates the great importance of achieving this, and will thereby do all that one can to achieve this goal. And this is often seen as praiseworthy. But this can and does then lead to taking what others value, because one's own wishes, the achievement of one's own happiness, is so dominant. So this can lead to stealing from others, stealing what others value, what others require, or even using force to rob others and take what others require. So in this way, one may have just this wish, or one has just this wish of attaining happiness. But because this comes infused with afflictions, ignorance, attachment, others arise, such as selfishness, anger, and so forth, and one ends up harming others. And this becomes even clear where the harm is greater. And those with power and influence, they can exercise that in a great extent. In particular, those with control over their own nation, they can go to war with others. So this expression, this activity of ordering one's military to go to war, it comes from the same basis of wanting happiness, but just striving for the pleasures of this life, seeing them as valuable, and then having the minds of afflictions infused, ignorance, attachment, aversion, and from this, so much killing, harm, and destruction follows.
Nasol Maki Gores, Nasol Tigores, Tibetigada, Digi Table, Nasol Kigores, Nasol Keva in Zata, Nasol Kevana, that Dungaso Dungan Yongo Chagurua. Cezananzulu Goetica, Digi Hadami, when you go one detail Digi to Yata, Dingy Digi to Yet, Cezan Digi Saptela, then Nasol Marti Dungan Yonga Chava, Dele Marua Chis, and the Nigit. Matibares, what that Matiba, Dele Matiba Cheche, I am as Marua, Matiba. Nutrition Buddhist, or that you're getting other Gavigi, J. Docho, Mika Watinishua, and the bed Matiba Shushias, Unias, Junchibures, or Dile Guncha, Mares, or that. They were done with the Gunche, the Gassan of the Guedi, Digi, and Sabla, that Dungajon by that Matiba, Maruma Chis.
So therefore, we end up turning our back on the nectar of the Dharma. In other words, instead of accumulating virtue, we accumulate non-virtue. And from this, the only result that can follow, the Lama Tsongkhapa continues, since that leads to the lower rebirths, what could be more inappropriate than that? It's only the lower realms that will follow such behavior. This is the inevitable result. And what could be worse than that? What could be more inappropriate? What could be worse than that? With the meaning that this precious human rebirth with so much potential, instead of fulfilling its potential, we remain dominated by likes and desires. We end up disliking some, even despising some, and thereby harming. What could be more inappropriate than that?
This is no trees, that you can visit the young quarters, and then some Tang, some Tana did it in the Shevena, some Tana did it, that do not do Shimotre, the and Dela Nibo Matimba, Tahara, Shaba, do Sim Shevena, Tangans Juba, and the chicken. Gawasaji, because a Tibasaji, dealing of the Chimoragor, and then you body, some not hangy, some not distangore, some not hangy, Dennis Taba, and the Dela Nimbo Matimba, some Tahara, Shaba in the Digi Juba Tinich and Migawasaji, then the Devo to Hanu Chagore, and some of some Tata Tinishun was, as we had the Motor Tampo, Dangazu, the water chair, Diaji, Delia. Di Tata Mare, Di Yahu Mare, and it put out with some Tata, the put out Mare, Di Antolia, Diki to two Mare, Di some Di Corbin, Di Antolia, Ganga Dunga Sejma, that was Suorwa.
All that is being described here is a faulty, a mistaken way of thinking. This is where the error lies, in a way of thinking. So it's through a faulty way of thinking that we suffer. Not only do we suffer, but through our verbal and physical actions, we cause others to suffer too. And not only do we suffer now and cause others to suffer, but thirdly, we also accumulate the causes that will lead to further suffering for ourselves in lives yet to come. All of this, our suffering in future lives, our suffering in this life, the harm we bring to others, all of this comes through this mistaken way of thinking. This we need to recognize. And again, as mentioned last night, not merely understand and accept, but it needs to transform us. We need to recognize that despite having such potential, if we continue not to be mindful of our death, we will waste this potential and create causes for suffering.
다네 신의 가오 두르에 셈비게 디지던다 신의 안송 줘야 돼 딘들 맞아요 말 제사 디네자 나 저기 삼노 델리니 뭐 맞된 바셔는 류어 주바 디신 디바기도 와딘자다 시두그레 시나 시두그레스 메섬나 야네야도 고우레스고다 디네 코네는 시에 대한 남친 예봐요 말다 셈베섬 고우레스 삼 코네다 남친 예봐요 말했음도 다 시나 안에 지기 개와티기 팽기리마도 디바티기 뉴기리마도 개와티 팽기리 세상 개와 두고 그래서 세상 개와 두고 세상이 다되는 개와 두기 세베다 가젤레 시루레 셈베 삼로다 게디칭에메야 레 셈베 삼로 디 땅에 기기다 슈켈레 가르고 그러서는 땅이 디바사바는 뉴고가 손레기 동안용과 차 세상 개와 두고 그때 개와의 베지신 두기 셈베 되게 두바기에디 기투고 그래서 디기고 그래서 이 돈이 두바기 토네 되네 류가 있으면 좋겠네 개와강 두고 그래서 원래 두고 그래서 나는 뭐지 되게 진짜 치워입니다 믿어봐 치워야네야도 삼다야 남친이메 삼다바 땅고 디다바 있나 최지디고 공로리기리스 최지디 공로 돈이 두바디가지 숙제려바이나 최디 교화지 지금 야매 숙제지 두고 그래서 제가 디네 자다 나도 최지디 공로 돈이 숙제만 말려바디 삼로되지 되길래 녀보 맞된 바지 삼마다 말이 제가 가서 삼당 거 가서 시기에 셈에 삼다 남친 이메 삼마다 위기기 맞을야 가서래 최지도 삼 되게 두바디 리고 말이 제가 디말에 반자 데딜에 된다라 이제 치와 삼다 남친 이메 삼다디 두스킨 땅고 거래서 돈은 이보다 두스킨의 삼다베는 대지 삼로되게 차상디 녀보 차고다 이번에 그냥 시루님이 시루 게지징해봐 요말다 섬다이도 되네 그 체디점기 안직 자활 양도야다 안지게 도시네 뒤스기에 되게 파 집까지는 어다딩이 개와 주부 선배 삼로 리거로와 제자리 되니게 년보디 가르스 다들 삼로 디수 년보디에 년보디 가르치 센다 아질래 치워고미하다 남식이메 고미하디 차고를 해지래
Where does this way of thinking come from? It comes from not being mindful of our own death. Moreover, or secondly, not being mindful of the causes we are accumulating. And thirdly, not being mindful of the rebirths that therefore await us. So these three components we are not familiar with. Not familiar with in the sense that they are not the thoughts that guide us. Mindfulness of our own death, mindfulness of or being aware of the causes we are accumulating, and thirdly, the rebirths that will follow from these causes. Instead of being mindful of those 3 points, we live with this underlying belief that this life is stable, that it's, in a sense, everlasting. This is how we innately or naturally think. So through engaging in the meditations that are to come, but starting with recognizing the faults of not being mindful of our death, the goal that we are progressing towards and will be attained through the successful engagement with these meditations is a determination that will arise within us to let go of being influenced by, deceived by our afflictions, and rather engaging in the Dharma, engaging solely in virtue. This is the result. And the more we do so, the more we focus on cultivating the minds of the Dharma, having them present in our mind, the happier we will be, the more confident we will be about our lives to come. So this is the antidote that we require, the antidote to wasting the potential of this life, to not fulfilling our potential. And this is the method by which to change the trajectory of our lives to come.
rally inza gewasa da mi gewasa da zo samlo la rally go jiza jing an ju na bi chu ge samda de samda na to ne samda na de ni samda ne gyun che go re sam de de ya ga ba ya che jiza de ni ge samlo da na gi to de ani gyun da yun de da gyun de pa ye wa che che gyun di de di sa de ni samda gyo ma re de ni she samda ne yun de de di la de di gyun de samda go re se sung go ro wa jiza de ni za da an ju samda na she de 내가 오든 예 나게 지치요 말다 시에게 내매요 말에서 지왕 내매에 지나게 지치요 말 시에네 다 최고래서 삼다이도 내가 저기 유학이 주봐야 삼다나이 토네 지게 저기 지게 샤 강변 나올래 기회를 겨베나 저 실로를 기회지네 군노다 소소 군노들이야 지게셔도 다 샤나를 기시다 다 뒤오네 저주 상계다 저주스 뭐 뭐야 제자 되는 상이 아 지소리야 장마 수제 직 상마 수지 기시 겹쳐 장마 수배는 혼줄이야 이 표현도 안에 직 상마 차이를 했으면 되네 삼다야다 아니 실로를 방어도 기회를 겨야다 지나 상계다 저주스 봐 핑거 디멘비게 미망보라 실레베네 당도 기시 상마체네 미셔산 세메기보다 심가하라면 배야고 그래 삼베게 셴레 펜비게 섬미군노타네 이 제베이나 에고 내가 지바레데 소수기베네 소소 나랑 강바장마제 미단에 배기부 거 강바장모도 세야 되어가라에 삼다제 강바장모 셔야 돼 셔바네 강바장모 셔바로 봐 당 군노토네 소소라 나기다 지 야 상예대 전시 뭐 목표가 돼서 내가 지금 장마치네 또 배하고 해서 배디네 삼단에 야 최비계산 최비토는 삼단에도 셔베네 야 지금 장모수가 내가 집어를 군노 전에 개발사요 그러와 어디나시는 지금 지게 니쿠베 가비네 다 지금 니마훈이야 상예대 전시 뭐 탐지야 지금 대바다 지금 겸로다 되게 샘자 탐지 디기도 그 삼다지 잠니지 삼다도 니쿠 소바네 지 니쿠어에 되네 지 개화사고로 다지사 누시네 디나싱 아주 기시를 때문에 대시 다 돈다 니고 다가 tem시네 밀리 견주제야다 지지세야다 바기셰베 주지케베네 디와차고로 와 디메베당 아주 양지 기시의 갑리야 셴리야 펜비게 토레 자와 제당 판생교되네 안에 라마다 상계다 자주선배가 연대되게 파티는 지요를 와서야다 제일 판도시나 로버치나 판도되네 여러 신기 동아되네 세투고와 강아되네 세투고와 야고를 와서 되네게 삼다 기시베네 기시베 지과래데 군노의 제일 펜비 삼다 기시의 지디야 제일 펜비게 자오주비에 기시야도 안에 개와사고 이나신다 아주 잘 도야 가리네 소소게 사야도 당에 심전이야 펜바시야 당에 개변념는 제발랑을 리소 거래 그래서 당에 개변념을 야고치야 된다라야 소소게 리딘도 쳐야게 된다라 아니 스칼라사게 있으면 삼다나야 개와체거로 엔디멘베 가서 지게 남겨 가서 슈바나시지네 아니 수바나야 무슨 빠도면 봐요 저슬이야 아니 진바인 삼다사와네 앞에 개와사고 저다 저다 자와 직벌에 소수 군노 삼다나 토네 개화를 규수해 제가 다 니미지게 쇼웬이 수랑지 공단이리베네 니미년가 레가레나 공단이에 제가 개화를 규수해 빈 생기도 나 지금 지게 신기 빈 레가스토베네 다 진다들 양이 레가레지 콘주게 펜바지 야고용을 쇼 콘주기미 디기투야다 이제 야고용을 쇼선 배삼다제 디던달랑에 콘주 레가야고 시긴 선배섬 레가레베네 이거 팬베섬 아군레보다 레가레바 지바레데 이나 소소 개와사고 제가 디네 자당은 저기 치와 템바다 근데 치위게 남쟁에메테 디네게 템비 토네 꾸롱을 시한야 가서 기위 꾸노 나제 자와 카드스네다 개와도 투에 차고와 디네사 다던데 니보디 아주 제와도 두시오레 송고르바다 니구 제가 니구에 가블이야 니마고니리아 상계다 제주 셈발에 대바지야다 잠니제 삼단 셴레 판베 삼단 예외나다 도시네 니가와사고로 니구도 신 삼단에 니그네 가서 차상 개발해라 거와 안지디가래 제가 현대식 시류 제가 상계다 제주 셈바다 아니 연den주비게 연den주야다 라마다 되네게 추기 팬연의 연den 거 기시야라서 바다 안 셴리 판도 주의 셴리 뉘어 기야 요문도와 데네 제라시 니가라 강아 데네 용도와 지 셴리 펜버 주나 네 야고도 와서 베 데네 거 기시베네 아직 야지 기시베 지과래 돼 니고 개와서고 와지
The accumulation, whether an activity, whether a thought process, speech, or physical behavior is virtuous or non-virtuous, depends on our way of thinking. So our way of thinking is what determines whether the entire process, from mental to physical to verbal, is virtuous or not virtuous, is dependent on our way of thinking. So therefore, it's imperative that we take care of our mind, and that is what we are aware of. Our mental state, the quality of our mind, is what we are aware of at all times. Because by being so, we can ensure that our motivation is genuine. It's a motivation of the Dharma. It's not an afflicted motivation. So that we need to both understand this and then strive to develop this habit. And what we're seeing with this first topic that we are looking at, and will be continued throughout this text, is Lama Tsongkhapa presents the faults of not developing a certain way of thinking, and then the benefits of doing so. So both of these need to be cultivated. Because when one sees something as undesirable and sees something else as desirable, it's clear what direction we will go in. But this is something one needs to reflect on again and again, so that one's determination becomes deep and stable and lasting. So the key points that will come is to recognize that our death is certain, but the time and manner is uncertain. Therefore, what is important is how I live my life, how my mind is, and what I thereby do and think and say under the influence of this virtuous mind from now until my death comes. And as I regularly say, taking care of our mind and ensuring that it's virtuous is something we need to do both in formal Dharma sessions, such as now and your own practice at home, but not only then, also between those sessions, in other words, throughout our day. And ensuring that we have these virtuous minds, the Dharma, present in all our activities, mean all our activities become virtuous, as opposed to either just wasting an opportunity when virtue could have been accumulated, or accumulation of non-virtue. So for example, I assume all of you have a responsibility where you live to do some cleaning. Most people like to live in a clean home, certainly will keep their kitchen and the dishes clean. So everyone does some cleaning. So if one is cleaning with a negative mind, feeling that this is unfair, why am I the one having to do it? Or one is thinking about something else, but if one's mind is negative, one is accumulating non-virtue then. Or if one is just mindlessly going about one's task, an opportunity where virtue could have been accumulated is lost. But on the other hand, if one is cleaning one's home and one sets out a motivation, this is the place wherein I engage in meditation, where I read my Dharma books, where I call to mind the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Therefore, I'm going to make this an abode appropriate for inviting these esteemed guests. And moreover, this is a place where their objects of compassion come. My friends come to visit, I reside. Therefore, for the sake of the objects of compassion of my invited guests, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, I am going to clean my home. Then, while cleaning one's home, one keeps one's mind on the topic of Dharma you're meditating on, this activity of cleaning one's home becomes an activity wherein one accumulates extensive virtue. So instead of a mind being negative and complaining and thereby accumulating non-virtue, one's mind just lost in distraction and thereby the opportunity to accumulate virtue is lost. One accumulates virtue from this common everyday activity. Likewise, every day one eats. So when one eats, we remind ourselves, this now is, I'm about to enjoy this meal in order to sustain my body, to live a good life, a virtuous life. My health, I need to look after my health and I need to maintain strength. Therefore, I'm going to eat so that I can be of benefit to others. Moreover, there are these beings living within my body, bacteria and the like, and I will now feed them. I will give them sustenance. And in this way, by feeding these beings, may I bring them in future lives, the Dharma. Through sustaining my body, may I bring the Dharma to all beings. To cultivate it in my own mind, may I help others in virtuous ways. And then keep one's mind on the topics of the Dharma whilst one enjoys one's meal, not allowing one's mind to be too dominated by pleasures of that meal or dominated by complaining about the meal, being negative, thinking it should have been like this or like that. In this way, eating becomes a virtuous activity. And when engaging in a third then very common activity of talking to others, at the very least, ensure that one is not complaining, one is not criticizing. Rather, at the very least, talk in a way that's positive and constructive. And ideally, talk in ways that are closely aligned with the Dharma, such as talking positively and constructively. And where the person is a fellow Dharma practitioner, rather talk about topics of the Dharma. And with whomever one is engaging with, try and talk in a way that's constructive and positive. Talk about the benefits of the qualities of others, rather than focus on faults and complaints. In this way, you accumulate virtue, and the person that you are interacting with, you're not leading them in a negative direction. And if you're engaged in conversation with others, and it is a negative conversation, make your excuses and politely leave that conversation. And in that way, guard your mind. And a final example is our day ends with required sleep and rest. The quality of our subconscious dreams is influenced by the thoughts that are dominating us. So ensure then, when you lie down, that you recall the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, recall their qualities, recall the topics that you're meditating on, or generate love and compassion, and have thoughts such as those influencing your sleep. And thereby your sleep isn't just wasted in distracted dreams or non-virtuous dreams, but rather one is strengthening one's habituation to virtuous ways of thinking while sleeping. So these are 4 illustrations of common everyday activities, cleaning, eating, talking, sleeping, that can all be opportunities to accumulate virtue. And what one does by approaching them in the way that I'm suggesting is not only accumulate virtue, but one is strengthening one's habituation to thinking in accordance with the Dharma, and weakening one's habituation to be dominated by attaining the desires of this life and overcoming the temporary insignificant problems of this life.
Dine zada zo nga zoke samli thone da chige digi tubiyo gadi dine zada samlu zo de samli thone dikwadan gyawase di uno samli thone charmuro zade nga zoke ndo chine samdang na indi tigda mari thone yawa cheju do chi ore se zade ne zada ang bin nga zo jimba ro ji ta ba jim je chonyu ji jimba ta ba ji bai ne ya uno ya kiwa chima na won ji kiwa chima da dine kaya samde je ne da gas some call order called Rodo called station Yakulism Jevene, Jevadi, that Tibetan Gasokewa Chunjuach Madiomarva. And Gunolia that Chinkewa Chima, when you go on to some baje, they tone Chimbatavene, Pajevene, and the Guno digitone, debi jimbata de gewa cheje. Anzi tarba 콜we 동아들 타다를 차지 tarba 토고 디도다 이삼다제 tarba 토여기 삼 군네 나지 제바이나 지메타바이나 디 팬 체제 다 딜레다 셈전 탐지 콜we 동아 타다제 산조고바 토비 치도 이삼제 다 디도나를 지메 군노 데니시케제 지메테바이나 디 지메데다 개와 초도교바 책으로 제가 디네자 지메테 충충 집에 있나야 군노의 토안에다 군노 미다와 실리기도 하더니 군노 토안에다 개와 체충 차야도 군노 같이 체나 니게 개와 체 차기도 그래서 당은 저기 개와 사람마세서 또 군노 토안을 하려야 차기도 그래서 대자 저기 디기트에 做 셈을 셈 공자고래 공고래 세디 또다 삼로디 비두스체나 제고래 세디 삼리 노트리 파다 가제 다 삼리 노트메바 근데 양다바디 야네야도 공제네 배주진 제고래 세디다 죄님을 세디 디던다 또 디르바다
Again then, our way of thinking is what determines whether an activity is one that is virtuous or one that is non-virtuous. That activity can be physical, it can be verbal, or it can be merely mental. So this term that we see here, inappropriate, it can be a useful term to keep in mind. When taking care of your mind, ask yourself, is the way I'm thinking now, is my mental activity right now, is it appropriate for a spiritual practitioner? Or is it inappropriate? Is it contrary to a way of thinking that a spiritual practitioner should act under, should live in accordance with? Moreover, with understanding that motivation is key, in your everyday life, you encounter many opportunities to give up yourself to others. And many of these are just done habitually or as force of habit or in response, as a habitual response to a situation. But if you are taking care of your mind, you can ensure that the motivation with which you engage in that same activity is radically transformed and therefore leads to extensive merit. So for example, when one does give up oneself, give something material, or give aid or assistance, if one just responds and gives, then this is something virtuous. One's mind is not afflicted, but the virtue is very weak. Whereas if one generates a sincere motivation beforehand, because one is taking care of one's mind, aware of one's mental process, a motivation of wanting to accumulate causes hereby to attain excellent rebirths, so much merit is accumulated from that same act. Or if one rather has accumulated a motivation that through this virtuous act, through this interaction with this other person, directly or indirectly, let me accumulate virtue that will lead to my liberation from samsara. That same activity leads to extensive more virtue. And so too, if one has cultivated a motivation to create the causes for enlightenment, that same virtuous act leads to immeasurable virtue. So by developing this habituation, whereby you're taking care of your own mind, you're watching, being aware of your own mind, rather than this plethora of activities and arisings outside of oneself, moving through one's day, aware of one's own mind, taking care of your motivation in this way, you will quickly accumulate virtue. You'll quickly habituate yourself to virtuous ways of thinking, and weaken and eventually break your habituation to afflictions and mundane motivations. This then is Dharma practice. This is how one practices the Dharma. It's not something sporadic or occasional, but something perpetual.
Uma shikebale jang hongsa, gangla jiti sumga dak rangi chida jebo me, yue di nalji ni lo na dele marung ji shenji yues.
Lama Tsongkhapa then quotes from Aryadeva's 400 stanzas. Now just change the third line a bit. When someone sleeps as though at ease, as though the ruler of the three worlds, the Lord of death, itself without a master, what else could be more awful than that?
Gangla jidi sumga da rani chida chibu me se di da ganjele anzo gangla jidi sum se di da ganjuge chiga deba da su da su me se di odu chine jidi sum se di disore yesan del ya ngada se di jidi sum deba da ane su da su me le pa ni che del ya long ju di ge ga sa se chi ga ngada se Tengata nim jidang ngada se ne gebo se ko wa wang yu yin gebo se ko wa jizada ngada se de jidin sum se de ba da le da nyu mo wang ge ji de ken da jidin de ba da su da su me na la ge de ti ye ane ngada se de ha chi da pa le da nyu mo ga rang wa me be chi wa yu de ba chi wa ne de ken yu de be ga sa ti ye se wa da ka la ji de sum ga wa se de sum ga da se de The
order in the English and Tibetan is a little different. So for us in English, we look at the second line, as though the ruler of the three worlds. The three worlds refers to the three realms, the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. And as though the ruler, so here the word, whilst it is a word for a ruler, the meaning here is the beings within those three realms, the beings abiding within the desire realm, form, and formless realms. In particular, or specifically, beings who are still under the control of the afflictions and contaminated karma, so ordinary beings, migrators. So this is what's meant by the term ruler, and the three worlds refer to the three realms.
Melia and Sala Sidi Dilo Comada Sudan Sumbega Atikis, Diniki, Dondaji Valley, Sawa, Satin, Sala Sid Sum Stevene, Caseng Nason, and Dendroa Mida, and the Comata said the Tada me, Nason Sum said it. Diane comes from the child, Diaba, Sumes, Casa Diaba, Sudan Sumes, said Sum Chishat, Masum, the Diabanala, Nasoata. The
This term three worlds can, as mentioned, means either the three realms, the desire, form, and formless realms, or it can be presented in another way, but the meaning is the same. As it will be, it's literally then the beings below the world, the beings on the world, and the beings above the world. The beings below the world refers to those in the three lower realms. The beings on the world refers to human beings, and the beings above the world refers to the gods of the desire realm, the gods of the form realm, and the gods of the formless realms. So this is another way that the three worlds can be explained. So either as the three realms, or as the beings in the lower realms. In other words, the beings in the lower realms, the humans are in the higher realms, and then the gods in the higher realms.
Rani chida jebo me soso chede shandaji and soso rawan meba chiwa meba che shandaji jebo boti shandaji yorbesin dide yomare esaji.
Continuing, and for us in English, it'll be the third line, the Lord of Death, itself without a master. So the meaning, so we'll look at these two lines together. So the meaning of that first line, as through the ruler of the three worlds, is that it's referencing migrators, beings who die and are reborn under the control of contaminated karma and afflictions. And being under the control of one's karma and afflictions is the meaning of the Lord of Death. So in illustrations, it's given a form as a being, but the Lord of Death refers to the Lord that causes uncontrolled death and rebirth. In other words, contaminated karma and afflictions. And itself without a master, so the Lord of Death, itself without a master, then this refers to that there is no, one has no freedom when one is under the control of the Lord of Death. Or in other words, under the control of karma and afflictions, one has no freedom over one's death, over one's rebirth.
di nal sidu karso wasna ta chidagi pa chiwa nyomo ba chiwi nyomo ba le pa tarshine sangye nal sidu sangye le yada chiwi ki nyomo ba rawa me ba chiwa de me ba nal sidu nal ma be yabu si wa nal yabu la wa jidan sangye dan dachon ba chanju sama pa ba de chiwi gi da le da nyomo rawa me ba chiwa de le draw wa draw cha wa number da ba de so number is be yabu de so nal 제가 다 상계다 근데 다좀 봐다 파베 강 전주스마 파베 강사 대기 치유 동안에 파 저사월 나마레스 배 야부레스 제가 다른 감숨들 내다 녀모공에 끼되게 되게 근데 그소리 상계다 전주스마 파바다 다좀 봐되기다 치유 녀모벌에 라마메 치월을 줘와인자 디 치월을 줘야게 탑람라 베지 제화셔 말아 봐 relation bezu jewa yo marwa is that then around konzo nashin jine chiwale ya bezu majinye bodin bezu maje ba nashin jine around kamsumlia leda nyumo wonge yidiwe semje digela leda nyumo wonge rawo chiwade yo banza konzo nashin de chiwege dele nyebo maten baje relation yo marwa eso ni lo ba nashin jine iwe ni ku ba na samle gine ma ta ji de yo marwa la goda 대유에 내시 니로나 되네기 두신의 삼마다지 니로나서 니고 두두랑 삼가야 마다 되고로 와다 삼가야 맞지 되고로 와 진짜 니로나서 니 원에 구하는 말에 그래서 니로나서 니구와 나신제네 되네 치워요 아 레더 니모 치워래 도야게 탑을 니뭐 마된 바지고 마공바 줘봐 있나 아니 이게 가서를 경침보래 델레 마롱아 신주 델레 경침보라고 그래서 제가 상계단 전주선바 파바다 저점바데 요콘도 치월을 줘사를 콘도 나신제는 가서 돼요 말했어 제가 가서 치월에 타야게 된다려야 냠매 슈슈치 배주 제호래서 이 배주 맞아봐지 이구와 나신 델레 돼야 봤나 되네 나들이야 아니 뇽 가서래 얘다 뇽모 치와들 줘두고 말해 줘마도 봐인자 네 나들이야 치와랑에 받치네 능아서 강아치고 딜레 아니 딜레 마로 현주유선 딜레 마로가 경심보지 자다가요 말해서 세월 자서
So now in the English we'll look at the first line and then the fourth line. When someone sleeps as though at ease, when someone here, the meaning of someone here is the beings described, and again for us in English, the second and third line. In other words, ordinary migrators, ordinary beings in the three realms, in the three worlds. Beings who are, and this is a word that can be translated in three ways, are without freedom or control or are helpless in terms of their death and their rebirth. In other words, beings who are under the control of their karma and afflictions. They are without freedom, without control, or are helpless in the face of their karma and afflictions. So this is the someone referred to. And then sleeps as though at ease. So sleeps, we understand. So this is when you lie down without a care in the world and have a good night's rest. Sleeps as though at ease. But the deeper meaning to this term at ease, because it's a correct translation, but it has another meaning of being at ease. There are specific beings who are at ease. They are those who are not helpless, those who are not under the control of their afflictions. In other words, Arya Bodhisattvas, Arhats, and Buddhas, they are beings whose mind is at ease. With the meaning of a mind being at ease is one is not controlled by one's afflictions. So us, ordinary migrators, now the whole line, when someone sleeps as though at ease, when we live our life carefree, believing that we have this expanse of time within us, before us, believing that these temporary pleasures that we enjoy are somehow meaningful, overcoming temporary minor problems as somehow being a success. These are the kind of beings we are, the someone, and we sleep at ease with comfort as if we were not in danger from our impending death, over which we have no control, and the subsequent rebirth, over which we have no control. It's our contaminated karma accumulated with our afflictions that has control. This is the meaning then of when someone sleeps as though at ease. And then the final line, what else could be more awful than that? So this is quite clear then. What else could be more awful than living one's life, sleeping or living one's life as if we were safe, as if we were not in mortal danger, not recognizing the grave danger we are actually in. What could be more awful than that?
대 상계단 저지스마 파파 나신지네 디 예보 맞템바제 지게 니쿠와 나신지 레레 되베네 제산 지고와 말레스 제산 텔르트투 말레 텔르트마도바나 제산 라마메 바치네 야네 야도 코와레 기디고 코와레 타야고 기디레고 말바 제산 니네자 마로마 디베 괜치무시우레서 단다닝보딜라 안제레 감숨나양한테 레다 뉴모 감숨나 기디베 semjen 데게 레다 뉴모 라와 메바 치와딜레 타르요 말레스 상계단 저지스마 파파 간사디게 타바나 콘조 비즈 제모가 나니 간즈데 님보 마텐지 비즈 마침바 되바이나 기디나데 코윙아 손가사 뇽모 발레 뇽모 베라오메 띠오 코발레 게데 타투 말레 제산디 자디 경치모 타르 토투 말레 경치모레스 제산디니다 단 레다 뉴모 라오메 게와데 타고고레 타고바자 인델레 님보딘 공고고레스 데 님보딘 공미야 가스네 뇽모 발레 님보딘 뇽모 바에들와 지금 다음에 봐 맞아요. 다음에 이 추림소에 돈에 시소에 돈에 다음에 또 베시랍 곰된 다음에 또 베시랍 곰발레 되네 다시 마릭 바디 빵용도 너고발레 라면 베게와들 탈고로 받는다 지스고로 받아.
So in brief, the meaning of this verse then, there are those beings whose mind can be said to be truly at ease, those remarkable beings who are not under the control of their karma and afflictions, either bodhisattvas, arhats, and Buddhas. These remarkable beings are at ease. But ordinary beings such as ourselves, for us to sleep at ease, to live our life as if we are not in grave danger, to sleep at ease like the Buddhas and bodhisattvas, when this is not our actual situation. For beings who have not woken up to their actual situation, but remain so deluded, they will continue to be reborn in samsara, continue to experience all the sufferings of samsara. For them, for those someones, those beings in the three worlds, for them, there is no end to their samsara. There is no way for them to bring an end to their samsara whilst they remain blind to their actual situation, whilst they remain asleep, not recognizing their actual situation. What is more awful than that? Recognizing that this is the position we are in, hopefully we shake ourselves in a lasting way from our own slumber and strive to cultivate the antidotes. The antidotes are manifold, starting with recognizing our situation and culminating with developing the wisdom realizing selflessness. It's only this realization of emptiness that can cut the very root of what keeps us restless, bound in samsara. It's only the wisdom realizing emptiness that is the actual antidote. But to get there are many steps of training that are indispensable. Lama Tsongkhapa then quotes from Shantideva, "Everything must be left behind. Not understanding that this is so, I did bad actions of all kinds for the sake of friends and foes."
Lagatamara Chiala Sopata, and a Mizawa Delia, and Delia, and Chico Conro Gage, Conro Wongi, and Delia, Indusine, Laga do Chetamara Chia Cabla, then Diva Mosago, Diva Nasana, yes. She's a Diva Savanza, Diva di Shiro di da Semite di Goza, Shiro di Manium to water, then you didn't answer Tito water, she's an answer to doing what showers. She's a dinner, there's a hako, a CHM, she's an answer to send Sedelia, Kiwi come to the two waters, Gawa come to the two and Gawadi, she do the same to the Gawa simply the showers, she do same to Gawachima do, the Gawadi to Gawachima, Gawati, Tendrilla, Tendrilla, Digi to the water, as a not that is more than. Chesan, Zadam is doing it, Tibetan, so that's yes.
Looking at the Thai verse then, everything must be left behind, not understanding that this is so. I did bad actions of all kinds for the sake of friends and foes. When our time of death arrives, immediately all our loved ones and our dear friends, they can do nothing for us, and we will depart them. So too, all our valued, cherished possessions, these things we've acquired and we hold as precious, they will be left behind. All this worldly knowledge that we've striven to accumulate, all that too will be left behind. This is what awaits all of us. Where this is then so important is that, not having understood this, we have striven to achieve this life's pleasures and overcome this life's problems. Thereby, we've put time and energy into our family and into our loved ones, meaning holding them, a select group, as precious, but others seeing as less significant, or perhaps even dismissing or even despising. This comes from striving for this life's pleasures and focusing on this life's problems. This means, in terms of the people we value and those that we do not, we've accrued so much negativity. And when the time comes to leave this life, we will leave them behind. But those imprints we accumulated, that and that alone is what will accompany us. The imprints from the lies we told, the non-virtuous behavior we engaged in, thinking we are benefiting our select group, perhaps even wanting to bring harm to the group we despise, those imprints are what will accompany us. So too, all the time and energy we put into earning a living and buying possessions, hoarding our possessions, striving to gain knowledge and things of no real substantial importance, all our energy we put into that, guided by trying to achieve this life's pleasures and overcome this life's minor problems, all of that too, all of these valued possessions are left behind. All this worldly knowledge we've gathered will be left behind, and what do we take? Again, it's just those imprints that we accrued whilst trying to cultivate that knowledge, those possessions, or cultivate those. So here we see then, I did bad actions of all kinds for the sake of friends and foes. Then what happens at that time of death? We have no control over when our death will come, when that final exhalation will be, and we have no control over the next body that we will take, in which realm we will find ourselves. That is in the hands of the Lord of Death, in the hands of our karma, the karma that abides on our continuum. It is that dictates the realm and the life and the quality of that life that we will take. So all these imprints that we've accumulated for the sake of friends and families, possessions. This is all that will accompany us. And whether that is in the high realms or the lower realms depends solely on the karma we've accumulated. It's a way of thinking that determines whether we are accumulating virtue or non-virtue in any moment. So therefore, it's our mind that we need to take care of in all situations. Whatever we are doing, we need to keep an awareness of our mental process. So if for working people, for let's say people in business, their focus is on the success of their business. In other words, that their business makes a profit, and preferably a substantial profit. So this is their focus. And if their working life is a large part of their self-identity, it will therefore consume a substantial amount of their time, mental energy, and physical expressions. Their business interests will guide their interactions with others, what they talk about, how they talk to others, and so forth. So through having this deep interest in their work, in their career, this will dominate them. This will define them. Likewise, Others, perhaps work's not so important, but they love sport. And thinking about sport, perhaps engaging in sport themselves, this dominates them. And this is what they talk to about with their friends. And they think a lot about the players in their team and how their team is doing. Because this is dominating their mind. It dominates their expressions, their interactions with others. So these are indications of how what we are habituated to mentally dictates what we talk about, what we do, where we put our time and our energy. And it will have an impact on our sleep. It will impact the direction we take even in sleep. So whilst asleep, we're not hearing. It's a bit like being like death in that we are not hearing, we are not talking, and we are not in much control over our mind. But when we wake, then again, these habituations clearly both dominate our mind and dominate then how we express ourselves verbally and physically. So our waking hours remain dominated or go in the direction of our way of thinking. This is what is of primary importance. If we want our speech or our physical behavior to be virtuous, our mind needs to be virtuous. If our mind becomes habituated to the Dharma, with a mind that's habituated to the Dharma, this is what we'll think about. This will be our interest, which means this is what we'll want to talk about. When conversation is about other topics, our interest will be fleeting. Where we put our time, where we put our energy will be in the Dharma, because that's what we're habituated to. That is now what we take pleasure in. So where we see our mind being drawn towards, where our mental energy goes towards, this is what we are most habituated to. For some it will be business, for others it will be various forms of entertainment. Be aware of that and see this is what you are valuing. And rather strive to develop an habituation to the Dharma so that this becomes what we value. This is how we are self-identify. And in this way, we'll be able to radically transform our mind and therefore our speech and our behavior. So we'll finish there for this morning. And this afternoon, then we'll start with the next outline, the second outline, the benefits of cultivating mindfulness of death. So there's still plenty of time. So if you have questions, then please feel free to ask. Yeah?
When last night Geshe was talking about interviewing our thoughts with our future lives, what I was thinking is that it's very subtle how to imbue what we do in our everyday life, like our activities of eating, drinking, etc. Is there an example of how we can imbue those activities with the thought of the future life? Because it's quite subtle, and I was wondering whether it happens through our meditation, affects our daily life, or is it something that we can actually do while we're doing those activities?
So how can we imbue our everyday activities with thoughts of the future lives? Because this seems something quite subtle to do, that when you're going about our everyday activities, to actually be thinking about future lives. Yeah. So can Geshe give further advice or examples on that?
samlo de komshi me wan sang zu le de skale chagor wa de gidin da jisadi anzu komshi so go wa don da ji ro ba na ji ge simje tham ji da ngai Shanlia Pembegi, Jamnichi Gombe Yamnechevi Nada, no Korea Dumala Taru do some the James Shalia Pembe to some Samdana, Chisada Chedelia, and Yamlea what Hajadan, give a Chima in a and it didn't delia, and the Jamnichi Gomia, the Shanlia Pembegi Jautuga, changes some Gomia, didn't Chabachin Tobachi, Sebi, the Guno de Chirwada, the Guno Samdana, that Jawa Chimi delia, Mundio Gomoto didn't delia, Jamnichi, the changes some Shanlia. 냠는 제기 된 캐바진도 토부도 지산디 토백이 돈달이야 개와치마 이돈달에 개와 원주고 토부도 sembe 나섬 군노디체 다이 군노디 토네다 지 삼다이도 군노디기 돈당이 누가 있으면 요건에 샬라 내가 지금에 sembe 삼다wen다 주름소에 차그러와 다 소수기다 샬리아 지게 제로 제지 로버체베나다 소수기 류가가 토네 샬리아 레가지 팔면도나다 어디에 도시는 샬리아 펜베체도 인생에 삼단의 군노들의 당부디 유바자다 이 마음반에 띵켜바제도 대대내야 냠내 야고지 투야게 된다야 또 시기에서 삼다वे는 지자디 맞아 님이 제게 소소래가 가래 제베네 대랑 아니 제 니네게 잠니제다 띵켜바지 투야게 대게 삼다지 내가 제대 최고와 지자 군노 당부 군노들이야 능아서 쇼에야 나제 남들이 개와 안지냐면 야구치긴 때 마오바이네 여와 치마이네야 안잠니지 전주스 미샬레 판도에 제도에디 대행원도 고관지 마토반다 갈래 하보레도 와제자다 디에자 잠니지 전주스 냠네지야다 샬레 판도를 위해 지도 개와 치마이 원도 고가 토바지 삼제 안 대행장에 누가 있으면 요거네 샬레 네비 제바 지금에 선배 주름 소야 다디링에 샬레 누가이 가리기 제하지는 샬레 팬비 자와지 된다지기 예습에 삼다데 또 삼다에 당한 저게다 디기다 개와치마 원dio 고방 토예게 치도 안데 유에사고래 안디면 비게랑 저게 좀유 잠니제 장주쌤 냠네제 도나래 유디 책을 받아 제가 얘네가 삼다 책을
What you are asking for is for help to or guidance how to develop a habituation to this way of thinking. Because once a habituation is built, then it is how you will go about your daily activities. It's a lack of habituation that means one has to remind oneself. So it starts with meditation and it continues throughout one's day. In other words, what one meditates on, one needs to keep reminding oneself of throughout the day so that it stays fresh and influences one's regular activities. So when one meditates, we can maybe divide it into two parts for the purpose of this answer. The first part is the motivation, and then the specific points of the meditation. So you cultivate a motivation of wanting to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, and for this I have to achieve ongoing excellent rebirths. So you go through various points of the meditation to develop a mind of bodhicitta, and therefore determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others. And to do so, that you make the recognition, I have to create the causes for ongoing excellent rebirths. So that's, in terms of how we're dividing it for this answer, is the first part. So the general motivation could be liberation, individual liberation, or could be solely just have a good rebirth. So one of those three motivations. Thereafter, the second part of the motivation, of the meditation, are the various individual meditation topics associated with that goal. So these will always include ethics, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance, and perhaps concentration and wisdom, love, compassion, whatever it may be. So these are the two sections: the motivation for one of the three goals of the Dharma, and then the second section are those individual points, ethics, generosity, and so forth. So these are the two divisions then of your meditation. So you meditate, firstly generating the motivation in accordance with those three goals, and then you meditate on ethics, on generosity, and so forth. And do that meditation, or include in that meditation, awareness of or recollection of your likely encounters in the day ahead. And think and see those encounters that lie before you, perhaps meeting people or tasks that need to be done, as expressions of being ethical, of being generous, of needing to be patient, of being loving, of being compassionate. So do this in your meditation. Then, in the course of your day, when you are approaching these encounters, these or whether it's an activity on one's own or interaction with another, remind yourself of your meditation. Now I'm going to be with someone. This is my opportunity to be generous, to give of myself. Or you're doing your actual work. This too is an opportunity to be generous with myself. And at all times too, to ensure my motivation is free from the afflictions. In this way, I'm ethical. And if one's encounter is likely to be something one's not so interested in, or could be a bit confrontational, then one needs to be patient. So patience in terms of keeping, if interest is low, one doesn't like the activity, being patient with the rise of the affliction and generating the virtuous mind instead. Or if it's patience in the regular sense, the challenging encounter, generate this beforehand. So in this way, relate to the various activities that you engage in, whether alone or with others, as expressions of the second part of the meditation, ethics, generosity, and so forth, which are all done within the overall envelope of the first part of the motivation, the first part of the meditation, that motivation. In other words, I'm needing to be ethical or generous because I want to become a Buddha for the sake of others. I want to generate bodhicitta, and so forth. Okay. Peter, and then Seppo. Okay, great. Then Seppo.
Specialists often been putting ethics and generosity in the perfections with ethics first and then generosity. I'm just wondering about the order in the Lamrim of generosity leading to ethics, and so it just seems like there's two presentations or two ways to look at it.
So sometimes then we know from the standard presentation of the six perfections, generosity comes first, but sometimes we hear ethics and then generosity being presented. So can Geshe just say something more on that? And I'll just say from my side, because I think this is a lot also just me giving it in not in the correct order. So sometimes yes. But nevertheless, we'll get it clarified.
지당 상예에 지당 송예들이야 마 파션 주기 냠내서 당부 진바지 송한테 파신 진배 파신 냠내다 주름되는 세가 전리도 송하려와 니바 송거래 당부 진배 냠내도 제가 송된 송거래 이 송당의 림바래 돌에 상예 송비게 진바 제자다 디 송어디 금제가 송거라서네 아주 밀이야 근데 냠내 제발라 튕긴 구거래 튕긴 매발 강아치고 진짜 튕겨야라 당부 아주 직최 냠내 주름 야고서 냠내 제발라 근데 아주 튕겨터네 강아 매바시고 구거래 진짜 대자 튕겨야 될 당부 진배 냠내 제거래 해서 도시네 송거래 냠내 제비값라 당부 인지미지 진배 냠내 제딘 주름 냠내 디디와요 맞다 그 제비값라 당부 주름 삼다 닌 진배 냠내 제아용 거래 당부 진배 삼다 이제 제용 거래 나서용 거래 이마 돌려 송외 빼내가 지금 지금 송여도 갑라 아주 나보 가르 송거스 대시가 송데 동아시아바 대시 덴버시 송여도 상이 대시 추어서 동아시아바 가서 군 동아방와자 군주시아바자 고봉문도 이제 남공바자라로 제성 고바된 일을 송샤로 봐. 이 고바된 일을 송한테 아니 토비하게 림바체 당보 람곰고 람곰 전에 람제려야 고발 용고와 림바코 끼위 림바체나 디숑고와 지자디 두시네 마 끼위 림비게 제다 소수기니 마송위 림바다 냠명무시 림바야 됐었지 그래서 미담에 가 용고래 그래서 인지미 당보 인지미지 진바제 된 제를 수림 삼당고 할까요 당보 수림 냠내 제된 진배님들 제가 용고래 냠내 제베 갑라 다소 용고래 냠는 제비 갑라 당보 수림 냠는 제 디제를 진배 냠는 제바 용고래 당보에 진배 냠는 제 디는 수림 냠는 제가 용고래 다들 파신 두기 해야 돼 장주 선배게 장주 선배 갑라야 냠는 제비가 당보 처럼면서 진배 냠는 또 냠는 제 오고래서 그래 내가 수림 냠는 지거를 배선 지거래 이나 쪼어디 진배 냠는 제 오고래서 지사 진배 냠는 제비가 수림 냠는 이거래 진바 다도가 샹야 야고지 제오로와 네 직접다 주부 파송고 지송도 수름 되고 와 진짜 진배 냠는 진짜 만절에 야야시도 진배 진바 진배 수름 진배 세바 진지 전에 진배 삼대 진배 셔도 진바라 파신 누가 제요 디나도 수름 라야 되는 제 수름이 진바 수름이 세바 수름이 전에 수름이 삼대 수름이 셔선 어두스는 요아 진짜 냠들이야 용거 스타다 장주 때때 파진 그것을 담보 진바서 하디 장주 선배 나가서 진바도 출연 저거 찾아 냠는 지고도 있는 쪼올라베디 진비 냠는 걸라고 그래지 디진자다 진바디 일송 파진 그거
So in general, in the context of the six perfections, the order is first generosity and then ethics. And then so the question's really just about these two, so I won't always say all six. But in terms of the presentation of the six perfections, it's always generosity first, followed by ethics. But this is an order of presentation, or the order that it is presented in. And the reason it's presented in that order is because beings need, one of the reasons is that beings need good conditions, favorable conditions in order to practice, and therefore they need to practice generosity to accumulate the causes that will ensure in future lives they will have good conditions. So that's one reason. But then a second reason is that a bodhisattva will have a focus on a new bodhisattva will have focus on generosity on the path of accumulation because they are focused on accumulating virtue. So that would be two reasons why generosity is presented before ethics. But this is merely an order of presentation. It is not necessarily the order of practice. One can practice in a differing order, such as ethics and generosity, or the order as presented, generosity and ethics. So it's not necessarily the order of practice. And to expand a little on that, if we think of the order of the Four Noble Truths, the four truths are presented as result and then cause, result and then cause. But we know that one needs to accumulate causes in order to achieve a result, particularly when one has as one's goal the third noble truth, cessation. One has to cultivate the cause for cessation, which is the fourth noble truth. So one will practice the fourth noble truth, the path, in order to achieve the third noble truth, cessation. So there we see an illustration of where one doesn't put practice in the order of presentation. And then furthermore, in terms of the six perfections themselves, whilst they are presented as six perfections, the first, the second, the third, to six, they are practiced together. In that, to take ethics, for example, but this is the case for all of them. There is the perfection of ethics. There's also ethics of generosity. In other words, when practicing generosity, one does so with ethics together. There's the ethics of patience. In other words, when practicing patience, it's not separate. It's together with ethics. When practicing concentration, that too is together with ethics. So there's the ethics of concentration and so forth. So there are the six expressions of ethics, or the six ethics, one in relation to each of the perfections. To give an illustration, with the the Bodhisattva engaging in the perfection of generosity, one way of being generous is to teach the Dharma. When teaching the Dharma, the Bodhisattva will be ethical. The Bodhisattva will not lie. The Bodhisattva will not use harsh words, will not swear. So in this way, we see that whilst the Bodhisattva is engaging in generosity, in practice, in giving of the Dharma, this will be conjoined with ethics. So therefore, the ethics are all practiced together. And then finally, or just in summation, there's an order of presentation, but that is not necessarily the order practice. It may be on an individual occasion, but not necessarily. Okay. Andy?
Is it also, I don't think you mentioned this, but it's also the realizations are around all that. Because the Buddhists are related to...
The realizations or the bhumis? The bhumis?
So yeah, the perfections are realizing that.
Okay.
전주 지당 전주 선비게 파진 루다네 파진 주념len 제외 갑라 전주 선바 초람 바디기 진바던 수준 서버 준리 차산 념len 거래 이나 초람 예대서 쪼데 념len 아이디 진비 념len 거래 제대 저는 초람 예대 가서 초람다 졸람 예대 가서 쪼데 진바던 수준 서버 차산 념len 거래 이나데 흉체어 쪼데 진비 념len 거래 제대 제가 당볼래도 되네 다진 진바 수준 제가 찾아 냠는 거를 쪼디 근데 수준 냠는 거를 해서 되세요. 수준 사 당보. 수준 마. 진바데 초조이네 가서. 초조이네 가서 진비 냠는 쪼원지 거를 해지. 초람의 졸람이네 가서 진바 수준 제가 찾아 냠는 지고를 시력 8진 누가 냠는 지고를 쪼 가르치고서 진비 냠는 지고를 해지. 사당고 톱차들과 다디나디 톱차네 가르치고 통람다 디수의 값을 가르치고서는 또 차상 지고를 때 있는 쪼도 수rim이 없는 지고를 해줘요. 누구시는 좀 말씀 누구 하느냐.
So yes, that is correct. But bear in mind, at all times, the Bodhisattva will be practicing all the perfections, all 6, or they can be divided into 10. The Bodhisattva is practicing all the perfections. So on the first path, the path of accumulation, the Bodhisattva will practice all 6 and will be focusing on generosity. And when focusing on generosity, and when the first ground has been achieved and they are striving on the second ground, then they'll be focusing on ethics. But whilst it would be now on the second ground focusing on ethics, all 6 perfections will still be practiced. So, as you said, that's correct, that as one moves to the Bodhisattva grounds, then the perfections are perfected in that order. But the key point is that all the perfections are practiced together.
Yeah.
Then thank you very much.